Welcome back, everybody. In yesterday's video, you learned how to graph systems of linear inequalities, and today we're going to be basically doing the reverse of what you did yesterday. You're going to be given the graphs of a system, and you're going to be asked to write the system. So write down those inequalities. So we actually did this in chapter 4, I guess our last chapter of the semester. And so what we're going to do, we did this with linear inequalities, just a single linear inequality. So this first page is just going to be a review of what you learned first semester, and then we're going to apply it when we actually have a system of linear inequalities instead of just a single linear inequality. So the first thing we're going to do when we're looking at our graphs is we're going to identify the slope and the y-intercept of the line. And so remember, for the slope, since we're looking at a graph, we're going to use rise over run. And for the y-intercept, we're going to find where the line crosses the y-axis. Once we have our slope and our y-intercept, we're going to determine whether the graph is shaded above whether it's shaded above or below the line. That's going to tell us whether we have a greater than symbol if we're shaded above, or whether it's going to be less than because we're shaded below. Next thing we're going to do is decide whether the line is solid, meaning then we'd have to have greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, or whether it's dotted, which would mean we have just a strictly greater than or just a strictly less than sign. And then finally, just this is more of a reminder than anything, we don't want to forget about Vux Hoi. Don't want to forget about Vux Hoi for vertical and horizontal lines. Okay, so hopefully this sounds pretty familiar. Again, we'll start with our first problem that just has one linear inequality, and then we'll go look at some systems. So just as a recap, right, shaded above or below. If we're above, we're going to be greater than or equal to. Below will be less than or equal to. Solid means it's either greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. And dotted is if it's strictly greater than or strictly less than. So let's go ahead and follow our steps for this problem here. So step 1 told me to identify the slope and the y-intercept. So I'm looking for an M and a B. So my y-intercept I know is where I cross the y-axis, which in this case looks like a -4. So I'm going to draw a dot there. And then I'm going to look for another nice point, which looks like it doesn't happen until here. So I'm going to use rise over run. So from these 2 points, I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1, which gives me a slope of 4. And let's just make sure that pattern continues. If I go up 2, 3, 4, and over 1, that looks like that works out. Let's see. Okay. So my slope is 4 and my y-intercept is -4. So now I know my equation is going to be y, and then I'm going to have 4x minus 4. So now I have to decide whether the graph is shaded above or below. In this case, I can tell the points that are shaded are all below this line. So I'm going to put a less than symbol. And in step 3, since I have a dotted line, I'm going to leave it strictly less than. I don't need the less than or equal to. And so in that case, we're done. We've written the linear inequality. So the only thing that's going to change with these examples, these next few examples that we do, is that now we're going to have 2 inequalities, and so we have to write both inequalities. So let's go ahead and look at a couple examples. So number 1. So I'm going to use color here to let us see better. So the first thing I'm going to work with is this line here. So I know I need to find my M and my B. So the B, I can see here I cross the y-axis at +1. So I've got a nice point here, and then it looks like my other point would be here. So to move between those 2 points, it looks like I rise 2 and run 1, so my slope is 2. And I can see that pattern continues all the way up. So for my inequality, I know it's y, then I've got my m, 2x, and plus 1. Now for the shading here, this shading is all above that line, so I know it's going to be greater than. And then for step 3, since I have a solid line, I'm going to add the equal to under here. So my whole inequality would be y is greater than or equal to 2x plus 1. That's my first inequality. Now my second line, it's a little hard to see, but we can see the boundary of that shaded area is this line here. That is a horizontal line, which makes me think of Hoy. And Hoy, I know, tells me that I have y, right? We know that a line is usually y equals. Horizontal line is y equals. We don't want equals because we have an inequality, not an equation. So I'm going to leave that symbol blank. I know it intersects the y-axis at 1, 2, +3. And so now, if I look at the shading, obviously the shading there is above that line. So I'm going to have an equal sign. And again, it's hard to tell here, but that's going to be a solid line for us. So we have y is greater than or equal to 3. So I'm going to put that all in the same color here. Y is greater than or equal to 3, and that's going to make up our system. All right, let's do number 3. So again, I'm going to use some color here. Let's see. I'm going to use green here. I'm going to start with this line. So I need an M and a B. So my B is going to be a -3. It looks like the next time I have a nice point is right here. So it looks like my slope is going to be 1, 2 for my rise over 1, 2, 3. So 2 over 3. So I'm going to start with y, and then I have 2/3 x minus 3. Now, in this case, all the shading is below. So I know I have a less than symbol. And because that's solid, I know it has to be less than or equal to. So y is less than or equal to 2/3 x minus 3. All right. Now, if I look at this line, my blue line here, my M and my B that I'm looking for. Well, my y-intercept this time is a positive 1. And let's see, I'm looking for some nice points. It looks like here is a nice point, and then here at positive 1. So my slope, I actually have to go down 2. So I go down 2 and go to the right 1, 2, 3, so a negative 2/3. So I have y, my slope is negative 2/3 x. My y-intercept is a positive 1. Now again here, all my shading is below. I can see here the shading is underneath that line, so it's going to be less than. And in this case, my line is dotted, so it's going to be strictly less than. So my inequality is y is less than negative 2/3 x plus 1. So that's what we mean by writing a system of linear inequalities. So as usual, I'll leave these other examples that'll give us something to discuss at the beginning of class when I see you, and you'll have a chance to ask any questions that you have. All right, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in class.